I'm Roselda Button, 31, and I built a life from nothing with no safety net, no real family to catch me. For years, I gave everything to the people who raised me, money, time, loyalty. But when I landed in a coma and they told the hospital I wasn't really their daughter, I made a decision that changed everything. Ever been discarded by the very people you bent over backwards for? If you have, drop your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I dive in, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to choose yourself after being betrayed, tap like and subscribe. What happened next, you won't see coming. I was adopted when I was 6 years old. My parents told me I was lucky. Not in a warm, grateful way. In a way that reminded me, often, that I could have ended up somewhere worse. That they didn't have to choose me. That my place in their home wasn't a guarantee. So I worked hard to deserve it. I was the polite one, the helper. At school, I raised my hand before speaking. At home, I folded laundry without being asked. When my mother had migraines, I learned how to make soup and toast without banging the cabinets. My goal was simple: don't give them a reason to regret me. When my sister was born 2 years later, the tone shifted. My parents called her their miracle baby. She had my dad's eyes, my mom's chin. People would say she looked just like them, and they'd beam. No one said that about me. From then on, everything she did was precious. Her babbling, her tantrums, even the way she dropped food on the carpet. I remember once, when I accidentally spilled a cup of juice on the living room rug, my mother hissed, "You need to be more careful. That rug cost more than your first bike." A month later, my sister dumped an entire bowl of spaghetti on the same rug. Mom just laughed and took a photo. But I stayed loyal. I was the big sister. I helped her with homework, read her bedtime stories, and held her hand on the first day of school. I watched our parents cheer louder at her piano recitals than they ever did at my debate competitions, and still I clapped for her every time. She cried when she scraped her knee. I cleaned the cut and found her favorite Band-Aid. I cried? I did it alone in the bathroom with the faucet running. By the time I hit high school, the pattern was set. I was the support beam, the one who held everything up behind the scenes. I picked up groceries after school. I made dinner when my mom had late meetings. I gave up a summer internship because my dad needed help with errands while recovering from surgery. No one asked, they just assumed I'd handle it. And I did. I got a part-time job junior year, mostly to save for college, but when our hot water heater broke, I quietly handed over the cash I'd saved. My mom said thank you without looking up from her laptop. My dad told me I was being a good kid. That was it. My sister, meanwhile, floated through those same years with a different set of expectations. She didn't need a job. My parents told her to focus on school. I drove her to her volleyball practices and waited in the parking lot because she liked when I was the one who picked her up. When she didn't understand calculus, I stayed up till midnight tutoring her. When she got into a car accident, her fault, my parents paid the deductible without blinking. When I asked for help covering textbook costs, I was told to check for used copies online. Still, I convinced myself this was normal. I figured maybe all older siblings played this role. Maybe this was how family worked: you give what you can and you don't keep score. It wasn't until my senior year that I started realizing how deep the imbalance really was. I had a 4.3 GPA, strong SATs, and glowing letters of recommendation. I got accepted into 3 great universities, one with a partial scholarship. I was thrilled. I came home waving the acceptance letter, ready to share the news. My mom's reaction was to ask if I could defer for a year. "Things are tight financially," she said. "And your sister's braces are starting next month." My dad chimed in, "If you can work for a year or 2, maybe save up, we can revisit this later." That night, I cried in my car. I told myself maybe I could make it work anyway. I picked the school closest to home and applied for every scholarship I could find. I also took on a full-time job as an administrative assistant. I figured I could go part-time, take night classes, and still make it work. Then my sister started talking about her dream college, an expensive private university across the country. My parents beamed. They toured the campus with her, helped her pick out dorm furniture, even paid for a college prep coach. I didn't say anything. I just kept working. When her financial aid fell through, I watched my parents dip into what was left of their retirement fund to cover the gap. They told her, "You deserve this." I overheard it through the hallway. That phrase stuck with me more than I wish it had. A year later, she called in tears. Her laptop had been stolen, and she had finals coming up. I wired her $900 that afternoon. I was behind on rent, but I made it work. She never paid me back, and I never asked. At one point, I tried to talk to my mom about it. I brought up the differences in how we were treated, how I was expected to take care of things while my sister was supported at every step. "You've always been more independent," she said. "You never needed as much." That was the justification. And maybe she believed it. Maybe they all did. That because I handled my own problems, I must have fewer of them. That because I kept giving, I must not need anything in return. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I had stopped waiting for things to even out. I worked a full-time job and a part-time one. I paid off my student loans early. When my dad had surgery again, I took 2 weeks off work to care for him. When my sister got engaged, I loaned her money for the dress she wanted. It wasn't a question. I just did it. At some point, I stopped seeing my sacrifices as temporary. I accepted that this was the role I'd been assigned in our family, the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who didn't complain, the one who could be counted on to carry weight no one else wanted to hold. I believed that being good meant being useful. It wasn't until the accident that everything shattered. Until then, I thought love meant doing whatever it took to make others comfortable, even if it left you empty. Even if it made you invisible. But when the one moment came where I couldn't take care of myself, where I actually needed them, that's when I learned how far loyalty really goes. In my early 20s, I started to notice things I hadn't let myself fully acknowledge before. They'd always been there, but I used to explain them away. Tell myself it wasn't intentional. That I was just being sensitive. At first, it was small things. Phone calls going unanswered. I'd call to check in, and it would go to voicemail. Sometimes I wouldn't even get a call back, just a text a few days later, usually from my mom. "Busy week, hope you're good." My sister, on the other hand, got Sunday morning check-ins. I found that out when I accidentally called at the same time one weekend and heard, "Oh, hang on, honey, I'm just finishing up with your sister," before she switched over. For my 25th birthday, I got a card with no message. Just love, Mom and Dad, and a $15 gift card to a grocery store I didn't even shop at. My sister turned 23 a few months later, and they took her to a weekend spa resort. There were photos all over Facebook. Matching robes. Champagne toasts. "Girls' trip with the best daughter anyone could ask for." My mom captioned one of them. I stared at that caption longer than I should have. But still, I let it slide. I told myself they meant well, that they just got carried away, that maybe they didn't even realize how things looked. When Dad lost his job that fall, I was the first to offer help. I dropped off groceries without being asked. Transferred $300 when the car needed repairs. When the furnace went out in January, I sent another $500, quietly, without ceremony. My sister posted on Instagram about how grateful she was for family during tough times, and my parents commented with hearts. They never mentioned the money to me. Then came the engagement. My sister had met him on a wine tour in Napa. His name was Ethan. His family owned some kind of international logistics firm, and he had the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about whether people liked him or needed him. The announcement came through a group text I wasn't part of. A friend of mine from high school forwarded me the screenshot. There she was, ring front and center, smiling beside him with the caption, "He asked." I said yes. The group included cousins, neighbors, even one of our old teachers. I wasn't on it. I called my mom that night. She answered on the second ring. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "I just saw the news." "She's engaged." There was a pause. "Oh, you saw already?" "Yes. Isn't it wonderful?" I waited. No apology. No explanation for why I'd had to hear from someone else. "Yeah, it's great," I said finally. Just, would have been nice to hear it from her. My mom sighed. "Don't be dramatic. We've just been so busy. You know how it is." That week, I noticed I was getting fewer updates. Normally, I'd hear things through my sister, her job drama, wedding plans, what Ethan's family was like. But suddenly, it was silent. I found out they were touring venues from our old neighbor, who ran into my parents at a florist. I found out the wedding was in Tuscany when someone tagged my sister in a venue's Instagram post. I found out the guest list had been finalized when I received an email from a travel agency confirming my flight itinerary. Coach. One layover. No personal message attached. When I called to ask about it, my dad answered. We figured it'd be easier if we just booked everyone at once, he said. You'll be with the extended cousins. I didn't even know the wedding was in Italy, I said. He sounded annoyed. We mentioned it in passing a few weeks ago. They hadn't. I got the sense that I was being handled like a distant obligation. Someone they had to keep on the periphery so no one could say I'd been left out, but never close enough to be visible. One night, about a month before the wedding, I stopped by the house to drop off a replacement part for their leaky kitchen sink. My dad had mentioned it weeks ago, and I happened to find one on sale. I didn't ring the bell. I still had a key. I walked in on my mom on speakerphone with a friend. She didn't hear me at first. She's not really ours, she was saying, in that flat, matter-of-fact tone she used when she wanted something to sound rational. We did what we could. But it's different. You know? I backed out before she saw me. I left the sink part on the table and drove home in silence. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours. My body was still. My thoughts weren't. Not really ours. I thought about every birthday I had pretended didn't matter, every achievement I had downplayed, every act of service I'd offered without question. I thought about how many times I had driven across town to fix things, help with errands, babysit. Not really ours. The words circled like a low, steady hum. I didn't confront her. I wasn't ready. I wasn't sure what I'd say, or if I'd be able to keep my voice calm. But something shifted that night. I stopped reaching out first. I didn't text updates anymore. I didn't check in. When they called, rarely I answered politely. I was always in the middle of something. I kept conversations short, measured. Around that time, my sister asked if I could help plan the bridal shower. Not host, just help with coordination. I said I had work obligations. She didn't ask again. I wasn't invited to her bachelorette weekend. I found out about it after it happened, from photos my cousin posted. The caption said, family only. I kept going. I kept working. I kept my head down. But every week brought some new confirmation of where I stood. I wasn't asked to give a toast. I wasn't seated at the family table. My hotel confirmation for the wedding was downgraded a week before departure. No explanation. At work, I was managing 2 projects and mentoring a new hire. I started staying late. The quiet of the office at night became a kind of shelter, no questions, no expectations beyond the ones I set for myself. I ordered takeout more often. I stopped checking my personal email. Then my sister's engagement party photos hit the local lifestyle magazine. There were quotes from both my parents. A full spread. My name wasn't mentioned. It's not that I needed the spotlight. I never have. But I had always assumed I was part of the story. Suddenly, I wasn't even a footnote. Still, I kept giving. When their garage door broke, I helped them get a quote. When the fridge died, I covered half the cost of the new one, quietly, again. I told myself I was doing it out of love. Or obligation. Or maybe because I didn't know how to stop. I told myself families are complicated. That people aren't perfect. That being pushed aside wasn't the same as being abandoned. It turns out I was wrong. But I didn't realize that until the day I needed them, and they walked away. It happened on a Thursday. I was driving back from a work site outside the city, one of those long rural stretches with 2-lane roads and no cell service for miles. It had been raining lightly. Nothing serious, just enough to make the asphalt shine. I remember checking the clock. 5:42 p.m. I was supposed to meet Elena for dinner at 7. A truck ran a red light at a 4-way intersection. I never saw it coming. Witnesses said it hit me on the driver's side at full speed. My car spun, hit a pole, and flipped twice before landing upright in a ditch. The first responders got there within minutes. I was unconscious, barely breathing. Internal bleeding. Broken ribs. A fractured skull. They airlifted me to the nearest trauma center. I don't remember any of that. I only know what they told me later. What the report said. I was placed in a medically induced coma. Intubated, stabilized. The hospital checked my wallet for ID and called the emergency contact listed on my intake form from a routine appointment years earlier, my parents. Still listed as next of kin. Still under the illusion that if something happened, they'd show up. They did. For 10 minutes. The charge nurse said they arrived looking more irritated than concerned. My mother asked how long I was expected to be unconscious. My father asked if the hospital was planning to bill them. Then they said it. Loud enough for the nurse to write it verbatim in the report. She's not our real daughter. We owe her nothing. They walked out. No consent for continued care. No medical history offered. No insurance verification. Just 2 signatures declining responsibility. When asked if there was anyone else to contact, they shrugged. We don't really keep up with her life anymore. The staff was stunned. The nurse told me later she'd never seen anything like it. Not even from estranged families. A social worker was brought in to figure out the legal side of things. She found my phone in the wreckage. Cracked screen, but still working. She managed to access my contacts and found a recent thread with Elena, my best friend. The one person who still called me without needing something. Who never made me feel like a placeholder. Elena was there within the hour. I woke up 4 days later, disoriented and confused. Tubes in my arm, the steady beep of machines around me. The kind of sterile silence that makes everything feel suspended. I couldn't speak. My throat burned from the intubation. But Elena was sitting there. Hoodie, leggings, hair pulled into a messy bun. She had a blanket over her lap and a coffee cup in her hand. She looked exhausted. When I opened my eyes, she gasped and pressed the call button. Then she leaned over and said, "You scared the hell out of me." Later, after the swelling in my brain had gone down and I could sit up without the room spinning, she told me everything. "They came," she said quietly. "Your parents. But they didn't stay. I waited." She didn't sugarcoat it. She didn't have to. "They said you weren't really their daughter. That they weren't responsible. They just left." The words didn't surprise me. Not entirely. But hearing them confirmed out loud, in a hospital room, when I was too weak to lift my arms, that broke something I hadn't even realized was still intact. I think part of me always believed there was a line they wouldn't cross. That no matter how distant or cold they were, if something truly catastrophic happened, they'd show up. That there was still some invisible thread connecting us. That illusion ended there. The next morning, a woman from billing came by to talk logistics. Before she could finish, Elena cut her off. "I'm covering everything until her insurance kicks in. And I'm her emergency contact now. Permanently." She signed the paperwork before I could object. While I slept, she'd called my employer, arranged a leave of absence, set up short-term disability paperwork, and coordinated with my building's landlord to hold my apartment. She even contacted the bank to freeze my accounts in case there were auto debits I couldn't manage. She handled everything. Meanwhile, my parents had vanished. No calls. No follow-up. No messages. Nothing. The hospital chaplain visited once. I think they assumed abandonment at that level must be accompanied by some kind of grief crisis. I nodded politely through his talk about forgiveness and finding peace. I didn't have the energy to explain that this wasn't new. This wasn't a sudden fracture. It was the end of a long, slow erosion. By the end of my second week in the hospital, I was out of the ICU, but still weak, still hooked to machines. I couldn't walk without help. My left arm was in a brace. My ribs ached with every breath. Elena was still there. She rotated nights with her girlfriend, who brought snacks and clean clothes and a folding cot. They took turns making sure I was never alone. One evening, a nurse came in with a clipboard and said I had a visitor listed under family. I blinked. For a moment, I thought maybe, but it was my parents. Back again. They walked in with polite smiles. My sister followed behind them, holding a bouquet. They looked different. Not concerned. Not relieved. Just calculated. Like people arriving for a meeting. "Hi, sweetie," my mother said, as if nothing had happened. "We were just in the area." Thought we'd check on you. I stared at them. Didn't speak. My father stepped forward. We heard there was an estate involved? That's when I realized why they were there. I had received a small inheritance the previous year from a mentor I'd worked with on a nonprofit board. She'd passed away unexpectedly and left me $94,000. I hadn't told my family. Elena had, on accident. She mentioned it to one of our old neighbors, who must have mentioned it to someone else, and the word got around. I was still silent. You don't have to worry about a thing, my mother said, smiling too brightly. We're here to handle the paperwork. Just like family should. They didn't ask how I was doing. They didn't ask about the coma. Or the surgery. Or the fact that I still couldn't sit up without help. They asked where the documents were. And when I didn't answer, when I just stared at them like a stranger might, they shifted. Well, my father said, his voice hardening. If you're going to be difficult, we'll have to involve the attorney directly. I turned my face toward the window. Elena walked in halfway through their sentence and stood behind them with her arms crossed. You need to leave, she said. My sister looked at me, then at Elena, then back at our parents. Maybe this isn't the right time. No, Elena said. It really isn't. They left without protest. No apology. No promises to return. Just silence. I didn't cry. I didn't say anything at all. But that night, when Elena asked if I wanted to change my will, I said yes. We sat with a notary 2 days later. I made it clear. If anything happened to me, not a cent would go to them. I left them exactly what they left me, nothing. The pain was dull and constant when I came to. My body felt like it had been rearranged in a way that didn't quite make sense. The lights above me were soft, but everything else, the beeping, the shuffling in the hall, the hum of machines, felt sharp. My throat was raw, my left arm numb, and my mouth tasted like copper. Elena was the first thing I saw clearly. Sitting in the corner chair, eyes fixed on a screen, glasses pushed to the top of her head. Her hair was in a braid I knew she only wore when she hadn't had time to shower. She didn't look up until I shifted. Oh my God, she whispered, standing up fast. You're awake. I tried to speak, but my voice was a scratchy whisper. She grabbed the water cup and held it to my lips. You've been out for 5 days, she said, lowering her voice. They said you might be out longer. But you're back. I nodded. Just once. And even that made my head throb. Over the next few hours, the nurse checked my vitals, a resident asked me a series of memory questions, and someone from billing dropped off forms I wasn't in any state to read. But it was Elena who stayed. Who helped me sit up, who fed me applesauce when I couldn't hold the spoon steady, who pulled the curtain closed when the bright hallway light got to be too much. The next morning, when I could whisper full sentences, I asked her, did they come? Her expression didn't change. She didn't look away. Yeah, she said. They came. I didn't ask what happened. I just nodded. She sat on the edge of the bed and took my hand. They told the hospital you weren't their real daughter. That they didn't owe you anything. The words landed softly. No sharp edge. No shock. Just confirmation of what I'd already understood somewhere deep. That when it mattered, they wouldn't choose me. They came back, she added after a moment. After word got out about the inheritance. They asked where the papers were. Asked about the money. I turned my face toward the window. Of course they did. She stayed quiet for a long time. Then said, I handled it. I didn't ask what that meant. I trusted her definition of handled more than I'd trust any apology from my parents. When the nurse came in to do her rounds, Elena pulled out my laptop bag from under the chair. I brought your stuff, she said. I know it's early, but I figured there were decisions you'd want to make. I nodded again. She opened the laptop, entered my password from memory, and pulled up the document folder marked legal. We sat like that for almost an hour, going line by line through my old documents. I revoked my parents' emergency contact status. Assigned Elena as my medical proxy. Gave her full power of attorney until I recovered. And then we opened my will. The inheritance had come the year before, quietly and without ceremony. A former mentor, someone I'd worked with on a long-forgotten community project, had passed away unexpectedly. In her will, she'd left me $94,000. No explanation. Just a short note from her lawyer. She said you were the kind of person who makes things better without asking for credit. I never told my family. I didn't think they'd understand. Or care. Now it felt like the only piece of my life that had any clarity. I want it locked, I said to Elena. The account. A new beneficiary form. Everything ironclad. Okay, she said. We'll take care of it. We called the attorney's office that afternoon. Her assistant recognized my name and offered to come to the hospital to get the signatures. Within 2 days, everything was official. Elena would manage the estate if anything happened to me. My sister and parents were removed entirely. No room for dispute. No room for guilt-tripping. No loopholes. That night, after they'd drawn blood and changed my I asked for paper and a pen. I want to write something, I said. Elena handed me her notebook and a black pen. She didn't ask questions. It took me 2 days. My hands were weak. My thoughts came in short bursts between pain meds and physical therapy. But slowly, steadily, I put it all down. Not a letter in the emotional sense, more like a deposition. Plain language. No dramatics. Just a record of what happened, what I knew, and what I was choosing now. It started simply. To my parents and sister, you told the hospital I wasn't your real daughter. You said you owed me nothing. I accept that. This is what I leave you in return. Then I listed it all. Every financial contribution I'd made. Rent payments. Groceries. Repairs. Tuition. Plane tickets. The dress deposit for the wedding. I itemized it, not for reimbursement, but to document what they had been willing to take, again and again, even when I had less than they did. Then I wrote, there is no anger here. Just clarity. You made your choice. This is mine. And at the bottom, in my still shaky handwriting, Elena will handle everything. Please direct all future questions to her. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't even justice. It was closure. The kind they had denied me for years. Elena read it once, nodded, and folded it into an envelope. I'll keep it with the documents, she said. Just in case. The next few days passed slowly. I started physical therapy. Sat up longer. Took my first unsteady steps down the hallway. Nurses started talking about discharge plans. Social work offered a rehabilitation center, but Elena already had something better lined up. A friend with a quiet apartment over her garage. No stairs. A sunlit bedroom. Rent-free until I got back on my feet. You don't owe me anything, Elena said when I protested. I know, I said. But I'll still pay you back. She smiled. Not everything's a transaction. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. Just a little. There was no grand transformation. No moment where I declared myself healed or empowered. But there was a new stillness inside me. A different kind of weight. The kind you get when you finally stop carrying something that was never yours to hold. I stopped checking my phone for missed calls. Stopped waiting for messages that would never come. I had always believed that being a good daughter meant being loyal, generous, forgiving. That love was measured by what you could endure. But now I was learning something different. Sometimes love means knowing when to stop showing up. Knowing when enough is enough. Knowing that survival isn't selfish, it's the bare minimum. And for the first time in my life, I was starting to believe I was allowed to choose myself. A week after I left the hospital, the nurses told me my family came back. They arrived mid-morning. Calm. Smiling. Dressed like they were headed to a garden party. My mother in a pale green blazer, my father in one of his old golf shirts, my sister in a silk blouse I remembered seeing on her engagement photo shoot. They walked through the lobby like they owned the place. No flowers. No card. No sign of concern. They didn't ask about my recovery. They didn't ask if I was stable. They asked to speak with someone from administration. Her estate, my father said. We need to get access to the paperwork. The nurse on duty was the same one who had watched them walk out 10 days earlier. She kept her expression neutral. Told them I'd been discharged. They asked where I'd gone. She told them the location was private. That's when my mother apparently raised her voice. We're her family. She listed someone else as her next of kin. The nurse replied, calm as ever. Her attorney delivered a sealed envelope for you. I'll go get it. No one offered them a chair. They waited by the counter for nearly 10 minutes while staff passed by, deliberately avoiding eye contact. My sister scrolled through her phone. My father tapped his fingers against the desk. My mother folded her arms and sighed like she was waiting for a late lunch reservation. The envelope was thick, hand-addressed, and sealed in red wax. Elena had insisted on the wax. "If we're doing this," she said, "we're doing it right." They opened it right there in the lobby. Inside was a letter, neatly printed on cream paper. No emotion. Just facts. It started with a greeting to Robert, Diane, and Griselda. Then I laid it out, one line at a time. I listed the amount I wired for the broken furnace, $500. The groceries I delivered the week Dad lost his job, $178.43. The portion of Griselda's tuition I covered when her financial aid fell short, $1,800. The down payment for her wedding dress, $900. I listed the hours, though I knew no one was counting but me. The babysitting, the errands, the rides to the airport, the forgotten birthdays, the calls that went unanswered. I listed the moment they told the hospital I wasn't really theirs, that they owed me nothing, that they declined medical responsibility while I was unconscious and bleeding. Then I wrote, "You were clear. I'm not your daughter. That works both ways." I explained that the inheritance from my mentor had been formally allocated, that Elena was now my power of attorney and sole executor, that all legal documents had been updated, notarized, and filed. And then, at the bottom, the final line, "You said I wasn't your real daughter, so you're not real heirs." The nurse told me later that after they finished reading it, no one spoke. My mother folded the letter back into the envelope and held it against her chest like it might warm her. My father stared at the wall. My sister looked like she wanted to say something, but didn't. They left quietly. No questions. No follow-up. Just silence. The next day, my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. A few minutes later, a voicemail appeared. It was my father. His voice was clipped, like he was trying to sound professional. "We received your letter," he said. "I think this reaction is excessive. We were surprised, but if that's how you want to handle things, we won't interfere. Your mother is very upset." He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't ask if I was okay. The following morning, my sister emailed me. The subject line just said, "Please." The body of the message was 2 paragraphs long. She said she didn't know they'd said those things to the hospital, that she only found out after the fact, that she'd begged them not to come back, but they didn't listen. That maybe, if I'd just talked to her, we could find a way to sort everything out. I didn't reply. I didn't trust her silence the first time. I wasn't about to reward it now that there was money involved. Elena read the message over my shoulder and said, "Delete it." She had her chance. Instead, I moved it to a folder called Evidence. I started rehab 2 days later. Walking was hard. Stairs were harder. My lungs ached after 3 minutes of slow movement. But every small gain felt like reclaiming something. My strength. My direction. My time. Elena's friend Maria let me stay in the apartment over her garage while I recovered. It was quiet, clean, and warm. There was a skylight above the bed, and every morning the sun came in across my legs while I sipped tea and read through the mound of recovery paperwork. A week after the letter, I got a certified notice in the mail. My parents had attempted to contact the attorney who handled the estate. He sent them a brief reply: "All claims must go through the named executor. No further communication will be accepted." Elena had written it for him. We made sure everything was airtight. Accounts frozen. Access restricted. Paperwork notarized. Passwords changed. Every trace of family tied to the estate scrubbed. I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance. Legal, financial, emotional. Something with structure. Something that couldn't be undone with guilt trips or carefully worded apologies. The second voicemail came a week later. My mother this time. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice shaking. "Please. We didn't mean it like that. We were scared. We didn't know what to do. You're still our daughter." She started crying near the end. Or maybe she wanted it to sound that way. I couldn't tell anymore. I didn't return the call. It's strange how final something feels when you put it in writing. You can say all the same things out loud and people treat it like a conversation. But ink on paper, signatures, stamps, witnesses, that makes it real. That makes it official. My decision wasn't about hurting them. It was about protecting myself. About setting a boundary I could point to. One that couldn't be walked back with promises or excuses. And once it was done, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. The kind that comes not from resolution, but from certainty. From knowing exactly where people stand. From accepting that love isn't unconditional when the conditions are never mutual. I'd spent my life giving things I thought might eventually earn me care, respect, belonging. All it earned me was silence when I needed help the most. So I wrote a letter. And in doing so, I finally wrote myself out of a role I never asked for. 3 weeks after they got the letter, I received a certified packet from a law firm with my parents' name on the return address. The first 2 pages were dense with legal phrasing, but the message was simple. They were contesting my estate designation. Not just the inheritance, everything. Medical authority, power of attorney, even my right to determine who could or couldn't visit me during recovery. The claim was that I was not of sound mind when I signed the documents. That I'd been coerced by Elena. That I lacked stable judgment due to physical trauma. I read it twice. I didn't get angry. I didn't cry. I just handed it to Elena. She scanned the pages with a calm I'd come to trust. They don't have a case. You're sure? I asked. She nodded. Everything's documented. They're bluffing. Let them waste their money. And she was right. She had records of every interaction, voicemails, texts, emails. Witness statements from the hospital staff, who remembered exactly what my parents said when they walked out. A written statement from the social worker who made the emergency contact switch. A signed letter from my primary doctor, confirming that my cognition was clear when I executed the legal changes. The notary who came to the hospital submitted an affidavit, stating I was lucid and consistent throughout the process. Within a week, their attorney quietly withdrew the petition. No apology. No explanation. Just a short letter marked "Motion to dismiss, no further action." It should have felt like a victory. And maybe it was. But mostly, it just confirmed what I already knew. When you stop being useful to people who never really saw you, they'll try to reframe your clarity as a threat. The same week, my sister started posting on social media again. She never mentioned me by name, but the subtext was obvious. Screenshots were forwarded to me from old friends, neighbors, people I hadn't spoken to in years. One caption read, "Some people write you out of their lives with lies, but the truth always finds its way back." Another, "Family isn't perfect, but cutting people off completely? That's not healing. That's control." The comments started kind. Supportive, even. A few of her friends chimed in with hearts and "stay strong" messages. But then the others arrived. People from our hometown. People who knew us both. Someone wrote, "Didn't your parents leave her in the hospital alone?" Another, "You don't get to play the victim when your whole family ghosted her during a medical crisis. And I used to look up to you. Now I'm just embarrassed I ever thought you were kind." She stopped posting a few days later. Word spread fast in our small town. The kind of place where everyone remembers your birthday and your business. My parents used to be staples in the community, active in the church, known at the grocery store, always invited to local events. But slowly, invitations stopped. My dad's poker group disbanded without warning. My mom's book club moved their meetings and never told her the new location. It wasn't public shaming. Just absence. Just the quiet vacuum that forms when people stop pretending not to see. Old friends stopped checking in. People they used to confide in were now reposting my story on Facebook with captions like, "Proud of her strength," and "Some parents need to be reminded that blood isn't a free pass." I didn't post anything myself. I never commented. I never shared a word publicly. I didn't need to. Meanwhile, I was getting stronger. Physically, mentally, even logistically. The rehab center across the country, Elena's suggestion, had a 3-month recovery program tailored for trauma patients. It was clean, well-funded, and more importantly, quiet. No one knew me there. No one had opinions or questions. I was just another woman rebuilding a body that had been through too much. They assigned me a physical therapist named Janine who refused to let me settle. I don't care how much it hurts, she said on day one. You're going to walk out of here better than you walked in. She was right. My arm healed slowly. My ribs took longer. But every week, the distance between who I was and who I had to be got smaller. At night, I journaled. Nothing poetic, just lists. Things I'd done that day. Things I planned to do next week. Groceries. Expenses. Apartment searches. Routine saved me from the weight of everything else. Elena flew out twice during those months. Once to bring me homemade soup, and once to sign the lease on the new apartment we found together. It was small. Cheap. On the second floor of a brick building with creaky stairs and a view of a parking lot. But it was mine. And no one else had a key. I didn't tell my family where I was. I didn't update my phone number. I didn't give them a forwarding address. If they were serious about making amends, they could start by not trying to sue me into submission. I changed the beneficiaries on my accounts. I updated my emergency contact at work. I made a spreadsheet of people I trusted and kept it in my nightstand. The transformation wasn't glamorous. There was no grand reinvention. Just discipline. Just distance. Just a slow, methodical reclaiming of space. I started freelance consulting work. Took on 2 clients from Elena's network. Set up a small desk in the corner of my new living room and worked 3 hours at a time, resting in between. It felt good to build something on my own terms. I stopped explaining myself to anyone. The weight of other people's expectations had never been mine to carry in the first place. Eventually, a former neighbor emailed me. Just a short note. I just wanted to say I believe you. I wish I'd seen it sooner. I wrote back 2 words, thank you. Nothing else. By the end of the year, I had no debt, no medical bills in collection, and no obligations to anyone who'd tried to take advantage of me. What I had instead was quiet. A clean kitchen. A locked door. A calendar I didn't have to share with anyone. And people, just a few, who showed up without needing anything in return. For the first time, I wasn't surviving in proximity to someone else's comfort. I was just living. Deliberately. Without apology. And that, in the end, was more transformational than anything they could have taken from me. The envelope was cream-colored, thick, with no return address. I almost threw it away, assuming it was wedding mail or a generic holiday card. But then I saw the handwriting rounder than mine, too neat to be a stranger's and unmistakably hers. Griselda. I opened it slowly, sitting on the edge of the bed in my new apartment, legs tucked under me, coffee going cold on the windowsill. It was short. 1 page. Lined notebook paper folded once down the middle. She didn't ask for anything, not money, not forgiveness. She didn't mention our parents or the letter. She just asked a question. Why were you always so loyal to us? No, dear. No, love. Just her name signed at the bottom in small script. I read it twice, then folded it back up and placed it under my tea mug, letting the condensation soak into the corner. I left it there for a week. The truth was, I didn't know what to say. Or rather, I didn't know what version of the truth she actually wanted. Was she asking from guilt? From curiosity? From regret? Or was it just a placeholder for the apology she still didn't know how to write? I waited until the next Sunday to reply. 1 page. Plain paper. No greeting. No emotion. Loyalty is a choice. So is cruelty. That was the first line. Then, I did what I did because I believed it mattered. Because I thought love meant effort. Because I didn't know how to stop showing up for people who kept stepping back. But I don't owe you access anymore. That's not anger, it's just the new boundary. I hope you're well. I don't hate you. I'm just done being available to people who only notice I exist when they need something explained or forgiven. No closing line. Just my name at the bottom, printed in block letters. I didn't send it right away. I left it by the door for a few days, half hoping I'd change my mind. I didn't. I mailed it without a return address. No note inside. No explanation. I never heard back. And that, honestly, was fine. In the months that followed, there were small things. A cousin reached out to say Griselda had mentioned my name at a family dinner, said something vague about wanting to make amends when the time is right. Another time, a friend from high school forwarded me a screenshot. Griselda had shared a quote on her story, Sometimes we hurt people we love, and sometimes the apology comes too late. There were no tags. No initials. Just that. But she didn't contact me again. Not directly. I think she understood that my silence wasn't a wall. It was a door. Closed, yes, but not locked. Just not open for casual visitors anymore. I didn't unlove her. I just unprioritized her. The shift wasn't bitter. It was structural. Like moving furniture in a room so the light comes in differently. Same pieces, different alignment. More breathing room. I didn't bring her name up with Elena. I didn't analyze the letter or wonder if it meant something more. I didn't make space for a narrative that made her the wounded party. That wasn't mine to write. But I did think about her sometimes. Mostly in small, disjointed ways. When I saw a blouse that looked like something she would have worn to a brunch. When I passed a bakery that sold the strawberry scones she used to like. When a colleague mentioned a younger sibling, and I felt that familiar pinch, the one that comes when someone assumes you still have that bond. I didn't flinch. But I noticed it. Grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a quiet recalibration of how you move through the world. I kept the envelope. Not because it meant something special, but because it reminded me of the line I finally drew and kept. That mattered more than I thought it would. One night, maybe 9 months after I sent my reply, I saw her name pop up in a news article someone shared, a local piece about a community outreach event. She was volunteering with a nonprofit. There was a photo of her at a folding table, handing out care kits to women leaving a shelter. Her hair was shorter. Her smile looked tight, but genuine. I didn't share the article. I didn't message her. But I saw it. I saw her trying. And that, too, was enough. I used to think rebuilding trust meant having long conversations. Letting people back in, piece by piece. Waiting for them to become who you needed them to be. Now I think it's simpler than that. Sometimes rebuilding trust just means letting the past stay where it is and not letting it dictate where you're going. It doesn't mean reuniting. It doesn't mean rewriting. It just means not reopening the wound every time you remember it was there. Griselda and I might never speak again. Or maybe we will someday. I don't feel a need to chase that outcome either way. Because now, the version of me that was defined by their approval, by being the helpful one, the loyal one, the invisible scaffold holding everything together, she's gone. She left quietly. No big announcement. Just a decision, followed by another, and then another. And what's left in her place is someone who answers only to herself. Someone who's still generous, but no longer sacrificial. Still kind, but not at her own expense. That's the real repair. Not in the relationships I lost, but in the one I finally built with myself. The office is small, 2 rooms and a borrowed conference table, but it's ours. There's a cracked window we can't afford to replace yet, and the chairs don't match, but the sunlight still spills in every morning, and most days that feels like enough. We named it after my mentor, her full name, no abbreviations. I wanted people to say it out loud. Not just because she gave me that inheritance, but because she gave me something else, too, the quiet belief that I was worth investing in, even when I didn't see it myself. Now I run a nonprofit under her name. We help women who've been pushed aside, by families, by systems, by partners who made them smaller than they ever deserved to be. Some come in with legal questions. Others just need a place to sit and not explain themselves. I don't talk about the accident much. Or the coma. Or the letter. My staff knows parts of it. Elena helped write the early mission statement, and she has a habit of leaving out just enough when she tells people how we got started. I let her. That version is simpler. But every once in a while, someone walks in and reminds me exactly who I used to be. A girl in her early 20s, sleeves tugged over her wrists, shoulders tight. Or an older woman with that look, tired, but not fragile. People who've been useful their whole lives and are just now realizing they're allowed to take up space without offering anything in return. They come in asking for forms or assistance with housing. They say things like, "It's no big deal," or "I'm fine, I just didn't know where else to go." And I remember. I remember what it felt like to be forgotten before anyone even knew you needed remembering. I remember waking up in that hospital bed, every inch of my body bruised or broken, and realizing no one had called. Not really. And I remember what it felt like to come back from that. Not just physically, but mentally. Quietly. Intentionally. Without anyone clapping or taking credit. I don't share my story with every person who walks through the door. Most days I'm the one behind the desk, reviewing grant applications or following up with donors. But sometimes I sit across from someone who's been through it, maybe not the same exact thing, but the same flavor of abandonment. The kind where your name is left off a list you helped build. The kind where your worth is only acknowledged when there's something to gain. And when I see that look in their eyes, half disbelief, half habit, I say something simple. You don't have to keep earning your place here. Usually, they don't believe me. Not right away. But eventually, they come back. And when they do, they sit a little straighter. That's how I measure the legacy now. Not in press coverage or polished photos, but in the way people learn to unfold themselves again. In the way they stop apologizing for taking up the room they're standing in. It's been 3 years since the accident. 2 since the letter. I haven't seen my parents since the hospital. Haven't heard from Griselda in over a year. They still live in the same town. I know that from a distant cousin who occasionally forwards me updates I never asked for. There was a mention of a retirement party. A community event. Once, someone sent me a local article that listed my father's name as a board member for a civic association. I didn't click on it. I don't need to know what they're doing. I know enough. They made a decision when they left that hospital room. And I made mine. Sometimes people talk about revenge like it's an act. A confrontation. A comeuppance with an audience. But the best kind I found isn't loud. It's clarity. The kind that lets you stop explaining. The kind that makes you indifferent to the version of the story they're still telling behind closed doors. And it's a life. One you build brick by brick in the open, with your name on the paperwork and your values in the foundation. A life no one else gets to steal. That inheritance, the one they thought they were entitled to, funded our startup year. Covered rent, paid our first hire, bought the printer that still jams every other week, but somehow hasn't quit. I think about that money sometimes, not as a prize but as a tool. It didn't fix anything. It didn't replace what I lost. But it made space for something better. A chance to build without asking permission. A way to give without being drained. A place where the people who walk through the door aren't seen as problems to be solved, but people who were failed and deserve better. Elena still comes by once a month. Brings croissants. Fixes the jammed printer. She never asks if I regret anything. She knows better. We have a joke now when we sit in the back office and watch the new volunteer intake forms pile up. She'll raise her coffee mug and say, "To the best letter you ever wrote." And I'll smile and say it was just facts. But we both know. That letter changed everything. Not because it was angry. Not because it made a scene. But because it was the first time I chose to protect myself with the same intensity one used to protect everyone else. That choice made everything else possible. That's the legacy. Not a story of abandonment, but of reclamation. Not what was taken, but what was built in its place. Quietly. Firmly. On my own terms. Thanks for watching. Have you ever had to walk away from family, not out of anger, but for your own peace? Would you have written the letter? Or left the door open? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone. And if stories about boundaries, betrayal, and starting over resonate with you, hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. You deserve a life you don't have to beg to belong to.